ओम अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्तस्वामिनिते नामिने। नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंदा। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। Hare Krishna. So today we will be discussing on Bhagavad-Gita chapter 10 verse 7. I'll read the verse now, then we'll read the synonyms, translation and purport. Etam vibhutim yogam cha mama yo vetti tatvatah so vikalpena yogena yujyate natra samshayah. Etam, synonyms. Etam, all this. Vibhutim, opulence. Yogam, mystic power. Cha, also. Mama, of mine. Yaha, anyone who. Vetti, knows. Tattvataha, factually. Saha, he. Avikalpena, without division. Yogena, in devotional service. Yujyate, is engaged. None, never. Atra, here. Samshayaha, doubt. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. One who is factually convinced of this opulence and mystic power of mine engages in unalloyed devotional service. Of this there is no doubt. Purport. The highest summit of spiritual perfection is knowledge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Unless one is firmly convinced of the different opulences of the Lord, he cannot engage in devotional service. Generally, people know that God is great, but they do not know in detail how God is great. Here are the details. If one knows factually how God is great, then naturally he becomes a surrendered soul and engages himself in the devotional service of the Lord. When one factually knows the opulences of the Supreme, there is no alternative but to surrender to Him. This factual knowledge can be known from the descriptions in Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad-Gita and other similar literatures. In the administration of this universe, there are many demigods distributed throughout the planetary system, and the chief of them are Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, and the four Kumaras and other patriarchs. There are many forefathers of the population of the universe, and all of them are born of the Supreme Lord Krishna. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, is the original forefather of all forefathers. These are some of the opulences of the Supreme Lord. When one is firmly convinced of them, he accepts Krishna with great faith and without any doubt, and he engages in devotional service. All this particular knowledge is required in order to increase one's interest in the loving devotional service to the Lord. One should not neglect to understand fully how great Krishna is, for by knowing the greatness of Krishna, one will be able to be fixed in sincere devotional service. So here, what are the benefits of knowing about the mystic power and opulence about the Supreme Lord Krishna? Has been said that the person who is factually convinced of this opulence and mystic power, he engages in unalloyed devotional service, pure devotional service to the Lord. So in the purport also, Prabhupada mentions that generally people know that God is great. People say this many times, that God is great, but they do not know in detail. They don't know if we ask them how much great is God, then they will not be able to give the answer in detail and explain the subject matter properly. So here are the details. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna himself is giving his Swa Mahima Varnan. He is explaining everything about himself, about his opulences. So only the Supreme Lord can explain about himself. And these are the details of how great God is. And then if we get to know about this, that God is great, then how God is great in detail, then we actually see God. So just simply seeing is not the actual seeing. the actual seeing is by hearing. So when I see God, I can think that he is just a person like me. But when I hear about him, that is how great he is. When I read these scriptures to understand from himself only, his explanation about how great he is, then I actually see him, that he is far far more elevated than me, and he is Vibho Atma and I am Anu Atma. I am insignificant in front of him. So this factual knowledge can be known from the descriptions in Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad-Gita, as we saw previously. And the Supreme Personality of Godhead is Krishna, and the original forefather of all fathers. So as we saw in the previous verse, Bhagavad-Gita 10.6, that Brahma is known as Pitama and Krishna is known as Prapitama, the father of the grandfather. The great grandfather. So these are some of the opulences of the Lord, as he is mentioning. This entire 10th chapter is just based on this. So Bhagavad Gita 10.1 to 7 deals with the topic that Lord is the origin of everything. Then Bhagavad Gita 10.8 to 12 are the Chatushloki, the 4 shlokas, which are the essence of the Bhagavad Gita. And then come Bhagavad Gita Sloka 10.12 to 42, which describe Lord's opulences. That the Lord himself mentions that of the Vedas I am Samaveda, of the horse I am of all the horses I am Uchaishrava, and so many other things the Lord mentions. And then at the ending he also says that this is again just a small part of what of his opulences. The glories of his opulences are endless. So he also says that whatever I have spoken to you is but a mere indication of my infinite opulences. So this is how great the Supreme Lord is. And without his will, even the leaf does not move. So the reason for unhappiness in this material world, why are we unhappy, is because we are not seeing the Supreme Lord. We are not trying to connect with him. So when we understand these opulences in full detail, then we get to know whom we are serving. Because if we try to serve the Lord without understanding his opulences, then we might fall under the perception that we are serving a person who is just similar to us, who is somewhat equal to us. But that is not so. We can understand that when we understand about these opulences. And again, as it is mentioned in Bhagavad Gita 9.11, that fools deride the Supreme Lord as he descends in the human form. But again, this is one of his opulences, wherein his birth, disappearance, and the activities or pastimes in the middle are all transcendental. But the fool who is behind the curtain of Maya, he cannot understand this. And the Lord is again incarnating to relieve the burden of this earth, and also to destroy the enemies of Indra, or the head of the demigods. So knowledge about Supreme Personality of Godhead, again some of the opulences in detail is in Srimad Bhagavatam 1.1.1. Janmadhyasya yatonvayad itaratas chartesh vabhijnya swarat tene brahma hridaya adi kavaye muhyanti yat surayha tejo vari mridam yatha vinimayo yatra trisargo mrisha dhamna svena sada nirashta kuhakam satyam param dhimahi. And also there is no other incarnation apart from Krishna who has claimed that he is the source of everything, and all opulences, all things in this world, everything emanates from him. So Krishna is the first person to claim this. and he is the only person who can claim it, because all of these opulences are his, and the person who is convinced of these opulences can become a perfect devotee. So if we don't surrender to the Lord, then we will surrender to Maya. So the way by which we can get the desire to surrender is by knowing about these opulences in great detail, so that we can understand whom we are actually serving and what we are actually doing. Because if we don't know what we are doing, then it is just a waste of time. So if we know these opulences, then we'll surrender to the Supreme Lord and utilize our time properly. Otherwise, we'll just surrender to Maya and remain in this material world, trapped and conditioned. So this was the end of the explanation on Bhagavad-Gita 10.7. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna, Dandavata Pranams.